Consider this, a book that makes the assertion that's reveal the mysteries of heaven, a book in that talks of angels descending from the sky, information that is prohibited taught people in a cosmic conflict that clarifies. Why is there so much in the world? A gloom today. Now picture this. This book was read once and is revered by early Christians, even cited directly from the New Testament. However, suddenly, inexplicably, it was expunged, forgotten, and prohibited. Why is the question? Why would a book that was such insightful knowledge about angels, people, and even the last should we remove judgment from the Bible? Was it too risky, too enigmatic, or did it provide insight into a reality that the world was not? Are you prepared to listen? Remain with me, because in the Bible journey for today mysteries, and we will reveal them the startling tale of Enoch's book, why it was prohibited, what it says, and then it dares to reveal humanity's dark mysteries, to disclose. However, before getting started, this is the Bible's mysteries. If you're in love investigating the Bible's riddles, please remember to subscribe and like this video. Just click the bell to access the biblesecrets.ed symbol to ensure you don't miss any episodes. Have ever pondered what might happen if there was a book that could address some of the Bible's most profound mysteries? A book that addressed the voids that Scripture merely makes reference to. That's what the Book of Enoch asserts. Presently, Enoch is not a haphazard number. He's not like one of the biblical figures that people just dimly recall. No, he is one of the most enigmatic persons in the whole of the Bible. According to Genesis, Enoch walked obediently to God. Then he was gone, since God took him. Consider that for a second. He was taken by God. Not that hindered, not because he was laid to rest in a tomb, but only that Enoch was gone one day. In a sense, brought into God's presence. Very few others ever had the experience. That makes you curious, doesn't it? Can arouse an emotion within you that murmurs, what was it that Enoch saw? Did he realize that others didn't? The Book of Enoch asserts that he responds to that exact inquiry. It positions itself as the Enoch's own works, as documented from visions and trips through heaven. It reveals angels, cosmic conflicts, and secrets that are prohibited. It provides information about the beginning of evil in a manner that the remainder of the Bible merely makes passing references to it. The surprising portion comes next. This wasn't always regarded as odd or fringe text. Indeed, early Christians not just aware of it, but some even taken from it. Consider the Apostle Jude, for instance. In the New Testament, Jude states, "Look, the Lord arrives with 10 to execute thousands of his holy ones' judgment on everything." That precise statement is discovered in Enoch's book. Jude wasn't creating it, he was verbatim quoting it. Word. Thus this work was not viewed by the Christian community as unimportant. They perceived it as something worthy of being read, cited, and being aware. Jude wasn't the only one. Earlier personalities such as Tertullian, church fathers, Justin Martyr, and Irenaeus were aware from Enoch's book. A few of them admired it greatly, thinking it provided explanations for the enigmas of creation of God. Why, therefore, isn't it in our Bibles now? What causes the majority of have Christians never heard of it at all? The narrative found in the Book of Enoch is among survival in the face of overwhelming odds. For this book was lost for centuries to the West. It disappeared from Europe, vanished from libraries, and turned into it was barely audible. However, it refused to pass away. It made it through Ethiopia's ancient church, where the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible continues to contain. It is still regarded as scripture today. Can you image that? As the remainder of the world ignored it, but councils discussed and scribes only copied specific. However, the Enoch book was still being read in African churches, nearly as though God himself ensured that it wouldn't disappear entirely. Then on the 18th century, researchers and adventurers made mistakes upon this old manuscript once more, conserved in Ethiopia's highlands. The world was abruptly reminded that Enoch's voice continued to reverberate from the previous. And that brings us to the fired inquiry. If Enoch's book was once revered, once cited in a religious text, why was it excluded from the canon of the Bible? Was it brought on by politics? Was it too contentious? Or was that because the internal facts were too risky? Unsettling truths nor comprehension of people and our where in the cosmos? Allow me to ask you something. If there was a book that could elucidate the reason angels fell from heaven, the origin of demons, and the reason why God had created a deluge to purify the planet, And what will the ultimate verdict look like? Are you not interested in reading it? Are you curious about the truth? However, what if that reality was too unvarnished, too upsetting, overly disclosing of the corruption of the entire world? What if it broke the tidy and neat image that religious authorities wished to give a presentation? Is that why it was prohibited? The Enoch book didn't vanish since it was unimportant. It vanished as a result of was risky, not dangerous in the feeling of being untrue, but in the of giving too much away. Additionally, that is the mystery that we are going to solve together. For if you believe that the Bible you own has revealed everything to you in your hands, there's more to learn. You may be startled. Shadows can be seen in the tale of humanity. Hidden mysteries in time, and Enoch's book dares to put them in the spotlight. Thus, the actual why it was banned is not the only question. The actual query is, what exactly is it that, according to this book, some people didn't do you want the world to know? So what exactly? What does Enoch's book say? Dutah, this is the reality. This goes beyond a few Gantian, dusty manuscript with innocuous poetry or philosophy. The Book of Enoch, however, makes assertions so audacious and disturbing that if indeed they alter our perception of the whole human narrative, and it starts alongside the angels. Enoch's book relates back then, a swarm of angels, strong luminous entities made to look down upon the earth, worship God. What did they observe? They observed people, women. Their beauty and yearning were evident to them, grew within their hearts. Now take a moment to think. Typically, we envisioned angels as impenetrable, holy, and pure. However, Enoch's book presents an alternative image. Angels with free will and the ability of temptation, competent to make a decision, rebellion. These angels are referred to as their watchers agreed to make a deal with each other. They took an oath. Let us, they said, come down here and let's get wives for ourselves among the daughters of men's actions. They descended from above. They captured human ladies, and they have children together. However, these kids weren't your typical kids. They were enormous. The Nephilim were among them, the same enigmatic creatures alluded to in Genesis 6. The divine sons observed that the men's daughters were lovely, and they married them. The Nephilim were present on the planet back then. The giants' powerful men, beings that were never intended to exist, half human, half angel, and anarchy followed. The book of these fallen angels, according to Enoch, are led by a character known as Samjaza, who was instructed by another, Azele, started to go by Zon information that is off limits to humanity. Think about that for a moment. It's not just concerning the relationship between humans and angels. This has to do with secrets, divine secrets, pouring out onto the ground. The humanity learnt things from watchers that weren't meant to be aware. The craft of fighting, creating iron weapons and steel enchantments, magic, and opening the gateway to evil spiritual forces. Their astrology is the study of the stars and signs, perverted into deceit and even cosmetics. Instructing women in painting their faces arouse passion, and enticed, and that seems uncannily familiar, doesn't it? Now weapons, magic, enticement, and corrupted knowledge. It resembles the seeds of every significant human failure was sown. That's it. Furthermore, the Nephilim, their offspring of this prohibited relationship, turned into aggressive despots, consuming not only animals, but also people. The ground was saturated with blood, packed with by corruption. Now pause and reflect. This adds a whole new level of complexity to what caused God to send the deluge during Noah's time. According to the Bible, God gazed upon the earth and discovered it was packed with aggression. However, the Book of Enoch claims that acts of violence originated with the spectators and their hideous children. The flood affected more than just people, immorality. The goal was to clean the worth of a widespread corruption deeper, and it gets even worse from here. Darker. Enoch's book explains how the screams of people who are suffering under these Nephilim's weight, and then heaven was reached via forbidden knowledge. And God took action through his angels. There Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and other archangels, and Uriel were instructed to secure the observers, to plunge them into a void of darkness, as well as to eliminate their enormous children. It's a tale of cosmic judgment. Giants destroyed, angels shackled, the flood purified the world. However, consider what this shows. As stated in the books of Enoch, the source of all evil in the world wasn't just Adam and Eve eating fruit. It was angels revolting, intermingling, and imparting knowledge that is prohibited toward humanity. That is an astounding assertion, is it not? And perhaps you're starting now. to understand why this book was regarded as hazardous. Because if this tale is indeed, it transforms our whole comprehension of humanity's fall. It argues that we are not only our own sins' victims, but that we were pulled into the shadows by creatures from another world. It implies that there are abilities, technology, and secrets, knowledge that people were never meant to possess to keep, secrets that continue to reverberate in the modern world. Here's the chilling part, query. If these prohibited items were trained once, are they still able to, now impacting us? Could the shadow of the Watcher continues to haunt humanity, even after the flood? Enoch's book seems to imply that the answer is yes. Thus, we must now confront the enormous riddle. If the Book of Enoch does in fact disclose the Watcher's fall, the source of their Nephilim and the knowledge that is prohibited, why in the world did that ruin humanity? Was it prohibited? Because, to be clear, it was more than just forgotten. It was purposefully put aside. Let's think carefully about this. Initially, the church did not overlook it. Recall, Judas cited it. The church fathers argued it. It was well known. It had its impact. However, once the councils of that church started to establish the canonical canon of the Bible, choosing which texts would include it into the Bible, the Book of Enoch was turned away. Why? Indeed, there are a number of factors, some of which may startle you. First of all, it was too supernatural. Enoch's book depicts our terrifyingly spooky world. Angels interact in addition to falling in startling ways with humans. The giants wander the planet. The cosmic mysteries are revealed to humans, and God dispatches thousands of archangels to fight over these creatures. Let me now ask you, what occurs when a book transforms the religious? Does the world seem too real, too close? It interferes with the cozy, secure imager people desire. It compels them to recognize that invisible conflicts are recurring everywhere, and that is alarming. The pioneers of the church might have been concerned that this book might lead to an excessive amount of fascination with a mystery, demons and angels drawing in believers away from the more straightforward emphasis on Christ. But was that all there was to it? Why? The second reason was disclosed. Too much talk of evil. Consider it. If the Book of Enoch is accurate, then people in sin is more than just our frailty. It's regarding an invasion. It has to do with paradise. Creatures entangling humans in corruption. That's a risky notion. Since evil is not limited to humans but a cosmic, then our complete comprehension of accountability, temptation, and even redeeming oneself becomes more difficult. The Enoch's book contains names. It tells us specifically which angel sinned and how it, as well as the penalty they must endure. It explains in great detail how corruption disseminated by knowledge that is prohibited. A few church officials might have believed that this is excessively. The public isn't prepared for this. They will only become confused. Or perhaps too much of the truth would be exposed. The third reason is that it didn't fit the power's agenda. This is something you must keep in mind. When the canon of the Bible was being completed the church has evolved from a persecuted congregation of believers. It was turning into an organization, a framework or a force of framework, as well as strong institutions such as control, clarity, and order. The Book of Enoch is far from systematic. It's crazy. It's cosmic. It implies that there are many covert conflicts in the cosmos, forces of evil and hidden knowledge. Things have an impact on others. That sort of the book does not cleanly fit into a regulated religious structure. It elevates too many inquiries. It stirs excessively interest. The status quo is upset. Thus it was cut off. For the fourth reason, it posed a threat to those in authority. Now this is when the exciting part begins. If Enoch claims that celestial entities corrupted people by providing them with, what does forbidden knowledge mean? Now for us today, is it possible that a large number of the structures we depend on, conflict, conceit, modification, originate from that water corruption? Can you understand why this is risky? The Book of Enoch is not merely a discourse about giants and angels. It reveals the origin of corruption in humans there. The foundation of society is spiritual decay, and if others think so, it could simply oppose the world's powers, both political and religious. Is it not ironic? An expose of wickedness in a book gets deemed excessively hazardous, but the problems it forewarned about persist in forming our planet. For the fifth reason, the end times are shown in a horrifying specifics. Possibly among the most ignored justifications for its prohibition are that Enoch's book contains vibrant, regarding judgment, God's ultimate return, the devastation of evildoers, and then restoration of the creative process. It doesn't use ambiguous symbols when speaking. It communicates plainly and directly. Additionally, that degree of a detail caused discomfort because to then, the church sought to regulate prophecies. Read about the end times, how they were. I got it. However, Enoch was also too direct, too unyielding, too harsh. Let's put everything together. The book's Enoch was prohibited since it was too supernatural, as it also revealed a great deal, as it endangered their religious control structures, and since it depicted a horrifyingly obvious image of the end of the world. However, this is the eerie idea. If a book was prohibited for being very hazardous, doesn't that further pique your interest in reading it? That raises the question of what truth and secretly concealed among those pages that the world did you not want to see? Additionally, perhaps that this is a more important question. Did you ban it? Truly keep people safe? Or did it rob a bit of the truth's humanity? If the Enoch's book has solely discussed fallen angels and corruption from antiquity, perhaps it would have been considered and forgotten and a bizarre myth. But that's not everything it includes. Additionally, it dares to make a prophecy. It draws back the veil of a time itself, providing us with glimpses of what is coming. Visions so vivid that they repeat what Revelation, Daniel, and even Jesus. Additionally, that's impossibly the most beautiful aspect. Enoch living prior to the flood. He had lived before David and before Isaiah, Moses prior to the Revelator John. However, his visions in some way depict things that correspond flawlessly with later biblical forecast. Divine or coincidental revelation? The magnificent vision of Enoch judgment. One of the main ideas of Enoch is a book of judgment. Enoch has a vision of the flaming throne of God's blazing fire, encircled by innumerable angels. Books that are open are visible to him, keep a record of all human actions. Then the unsettling declaration that follows there. The earth's kings, fallen angels, the powerful individuals who tainted the globe, everyone will be judged. Isn't that seem familiar? The book of Revelation. The vast white throne is mentioned. Judgment. Daniel mentions the ancient soft days spent reading while perched on his throne open. When Enoch first noticed it, Hen explains it with frightful precision. The wicked shall be annihilated. There the righteous shall be as bright as the sun, and God's everlasting reign will be established. Here's the startling bit, though. Enoch's prophecy is more than that. It's around this time, due to Enoch's assertion that the corruption that started when the Watchers were involved won't go till the last judgment. Consequently, the shadows of their impact is still felt today, whispering in our world, still moving. The Messiah prophecy. Now this is where the action truly picks up. The book Enoch discusses more than just angels in judgment. It foretells an impending person, a son of man, a chosen one. Does that sound familiar? Enoch explains the image of a person who has been elevated by God, who resides on a glorious throne, who will judge the living and the dead, and bring the righteous to salvation. This was centuries before Christ's time. Nevertheless, Enoch employs nearly the same similar terminology used by Jesus regarding himself. Indeed, when Jesus calls, he refers to himself as the Son of Man, greater than any other, and it's not only because Daniel. It reminds me of Enoch. Consider that. Is it possible that Jesus was directly associating himself with this an old prophecy? Is it possible that he believing that I am the one Enoch saw? Consequently, dismissing the Book of Enoch didn't merely conceal odd tales. It buried one of the most obvious prophetic prophecies not found in the Bible. The flood prophesy and beyond. Additionally, Enoch foretold the deluge of Noah. He observed the devastation that was arriving as a result of the observers in their Nephilim. He forewarned. He resided in its shadow. However, his predictions, it didn't end there. He witnessed the rise of kingdoms and tumble. He witnessed periods of immense evil, followed by periods of rebirth. In fact, he predicted the resurrection of the deceased, the pious ascending to eternity life, and the wicked to humiliation for all eternity. That sounds like Daniel, doesn't it? Does that sound like a revelation? And this is the persistent query. How could before Noah, man was aware of these items unless he actually walked with a God? If God hadn't actually taken him in to show him the story and take him to the celestial realms, of the actual history, the fear and then hope. This is the emotional burden of the prophecy of Enoch. In one sense, it is horrifying. It expresses anger, destruction, and judgment. It discusses cosmic forces being penalized and the division of humanity into them, the good and the bad. However, it is full of hope, because Enoch sees more than just the finish at the entire world. He witnesses its revival. The righteous are clothed in glory, he sees. He witnesses the restoration of earth and heaven, and witnesses God eradicating the corruption that has contaminated the world since the beginning of the observers. And he envisions a time when people who follow God will live in his eternal light. That's strong, isn't it? Enoch's book is more than just a grimness story about angels that have fallen. It's an prophetic hope that notwithstanding regardless of the extent of the corruption, no matter how bad things become, God's plan will win out. Perhaps it was also for that reason quieted. Due to the fact that when individuals read, with such specificity in the prophecy, it ignites a potentially harmful substance. Mixed faith with haste. It helps you understand that the end isn't merely a theoretical idea. It's true. It will arrive. And we must prepare yourself. So this is the query I would like to finish this chapter with you. If in thousands of years before Christ man might perceive glimpses of the Messiah, the judgment, as well as the restoration of all, what can we infer from it regarding do we serve God? Despite the fact that the majority of the Book of Enoch was situated in the Christian world, not everyone, however, let it go. In the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia has never prohibited it. They continue to read to this day. It is included in their Bible, and in the vicinity, the globe, an increasing number of individuals are finding it again. Those that are curious about, perhaps just possibly, this misplaced book still conveys facts that we must hear. Thus, and what does that leave us with? This is the mystery. Perhaps Enoch's book was never intended to be fully buried. Perhaps God let it to endure through the ages, concealed, conserved, in anticipation of a moment when the world was prepared to confront the startling secrets it includes. Details regarding the collapse of angels, information regarding the corruption of mankind, as well as details on the ultimate judgment and the Messiah's hope. It's in your hands now. The query is, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to write it off as a myth? Will you be afraid of it as risky? Or are you going to consider it a reminder that the conflict between light and there is much more darkness than we can imagine? Envisioned, and that God has already proclaimed the triumph. Because this is the truth. Whether you agree with the one thing about the Book of Enoch as scripture is indisputable, it brings us back to the truth of God's justice, his judgment, and his unfailing scheme to make amends humanity. I will therefore depart as we conclude this excursion. You with this idea. Perhaps the Book of Men outlawed Enoch, yet its message in God could never silence them. Additionally, how this exploration opened your eyes. Please remember to subscribe and like this video. To hit the bell and go to the BibleSecrets symbol in order to avoid missing the following mystery. Together, we reveal. In the interim, never forget that the truth is waiting if you're prepared to look for it.